Hi.
So let's get going. We are 7:35. Firstly, thank you, Sanjay, for joining us this evening. And I'll request Maha to introduce him for us.
I know Sanjay's wife. Since 2003, when I moved into Bangalore, and our friendship blossomed at the main gate of Raheja Residency. Both of us used to go to the main gate to pick up our kids from school to drop the kids there. And there are days when we would wait that our spouse would do that. So I think at that point of time, Sanjay was also traveling like Chendil. Eventually she happened to be the interior designer of two of my houses, the previous flat and this house. And she's a very good interior designer, had no problems with her. Anytime I need anything, she's there. So that is it. She works with she has a partner who's called, Sindhu. So both of them, and we three are from Raheja Residency. So still, Jyoti continues. Sanjay's wife, Sanjay and Jyoti continue to be there. So Sindhu and I, we have moved out, and our friendship is really healthy. It's nice. So that's it. And when Swati and I started this art reads, I was just going through different organizations on the net, which would help the women entrepreneurs to get some tips and stuff. So at that point of time, I came across the site called a Catalyst for Women Entrepreneurship. When I was just browsing through, I saw Sanjay's picture and write upon him. Then immediately I called Jyoti and said, hey, Sanjay, who is that? So I think even she has not gone through at that point of time, I think so. So that is it. Then I was thinking, she used to share after that what Sanjay used to do and stuff. And when you were asking for voluntary speakers, I thought I should get somebody because I'm not a good speaker where I could discuss on anything. At least let me bring some volunteers, I thought. So I just checked with Jyoti because I don't think Sanjay remembers me. I used to see him only in the elevator or in the walk, a very tall person, that's it. And I think, Sanjay, we have met once in Shubhamoy's house.
You must excuse me. I'm going to take refuge by claiming my old age for not remembering the details.
In this group, you can't claim old age. Chances are you're going to be the youngest.
Early onset of amnesia there.
And I just called up Jyoti and asked if Sanjay would be interested in being a volunteer speaker for this Arbors Literary Club. She checked with Sanjay, and at that point of time, I think they were in Kabini. She said, just give me a week's time, I'll get back. And she got back, and Sanjay agreed to it. That's it.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Shibu. Thanks, Mahalakshmi. That was wonderful. And it's a great pleasure to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about myself so that it gives you context around what it is that I will be speaking on today. A little over 30 years of experience, largely around innovation, entrepreneurship, venture capital, startups, all of that world. Been involved with several new initiatives, both in India and outside. Set up one of India's first venture funds in 2000, a $45 million fund investing in California and in India.
You're muted, Sanjay.
Gosh.
Sanjay, you've gotten muted.
Okay. So, been involved with multiple initiatives and projects because I believe that entrepreneurship is the vehicle for social transformation. It's a mindset that needs to be brought in, where you question the status quo, where you work around challenges and obstacles of all kinds, whether they're political, regulatory, legal, commercial, whatever else, market challenges, and essentially find solutions to problems. Because, all along we've been brought up in an environment where we tend to worry about constraints, given the environments in which all of us have grown up in, and not worry about possibilities, right? So a lot of constraint-based reasoning tends to dominate our minds, not possibilities. Even today, when I meet entrepreneurs, the question is, how do I start? I don't have an idea. I don't have a team. I don't have a network. I've got nothing, I've done nothing innovative in my life. I don't have money. I don't have anything. And, but nobody thinks about possibilities, right? I mean, is it possible for you to be an entrepreneur? Is it possible for you to climb Everest? And therefore, what do you need to do to climb it? If it's possible, it's doable, right? So it is that kind of a mindset that needs to emerge. So anyway, so I got back from the US. I used to have a startup there. Before that, I started off my career with Wipro, did a bunch of things starting from the mid 1980s. Then I had my own startup in the Bay Area, and then that became a part of Disney. I got back to India. I started India's first magazine aimed at entrepreneurs to bring all of that excitement to India. Then I started a fund, then did a bunch of things, worked on policy, I got into teaching. So I taught for 7 years at the INSEAD Business School at various IIMs, etc. Lectured extensively, wrote, did all kinds of things, essentially to create groups that would set the ball rolling for different kinds of entrepreneurial initiatives. So today I advise a few funds, I'm involved with them, sit on the boards of a few companies, and I work with a lot of startups and spend a lot of my time mentoring young entrepreneurs, because I believe that's the way in which transformation will occur across the board, across sectors. So around last year, around the middle of 2020, I became the co-founder of a Section 8 company called NICE, Network of Indian Cultural Enterprises. The objective of NICE is rather simple. For too long, we have looked at India's cultural assets, the artifacts, the heritage, the intellectual property, the traditions, practices, all of it, as something that needs to be protected, but protected largely from a development sector worldview. In other words, there were poor artisans and craftspeople and others who were weighed down by hardship, by lack of awareness and all of that, lack of capacity. So lots of initiatives by various bodies, government as well as NGOs and the private sector got involved with lots and lots of them, but looked at that entire sector from a developmental standpoint, from a capacity building standpoint, from training and getting them up to steam. But having worked in the IT sector and technology and all of that, you realize that the only sector in which India is globally recognized, respected, and regarded has been IT and technology. It's a $190 billion business. Anywhere in the world you go, Indian IT is known. Indian executives are in senior positions across the board. And therefore, it's the one industry which has got a very high value add. It is environmentally friendly, and it has contributed to creating a very positive image, not just for Indians and India, but most importantly for the middle class in India. It's given them aspiration, it's given them hope. And all of it has happened because we've been able to go and create brands and create economic success in the outside world. So we were wanting to bring in that kind of a thinking to the quote unquote cultural area. And I'll explain that in a minute. That is, how does one bring in the market linkages, the branding, the innovation, the technology and all of that to the sector of cultural enterprises, right? Which was essentially which has essentially been looked at, like I said earlier, as a social or a development sector project, not as something that could generate sound economic value, okay? And there have been a few examples far between, Fab India is one example. Amul is another example, right? But we don't have, the question we should be asking is, how come we don't have 50 Amuls? How come we don't have 50 Fab Indias, right? Now, the multiple reasons for that, we'll get into it as we make progress. But the thinking was, how do I bring in the demand side of the equation to dovetail with the supply side approach that's been deployed in the past several decades, right? So the jugalbandi between the market and the supply side had to happen. And hence, network of Indian cultural enterprises, whose stated charter is to be an ecosystem, to create an ecosystem within which cultural enterprises can thrive and flourish and grow, where there are mentors, where there are investors, where there are partnerships of all kinds. There's also an advocacy group. There's also going to be a policy group as we go ahead to drive change in all of this. Exactly like some of you may be familiar with an organization called TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs, which has been around for about 30 years. And what role TIE played in fostering entrepreneurship, essentially around IT and tech and so on, is one of the things that NICE aims to do. Then you had NASSCOM, which played a policy advocacy role, in the early days of Indian software. Then you had angel networks, the Indian Angel Network and a bunch of others that have emerged. And the pace of change, the rate of change in the world outside is something that we want to be able to use positively for providing inputs to all the amazing artisans, craftspeople, and others to essentially go out and build businesses with the help of investors, mentors, industry partnerships, and a bunch of others. So what we did is we set this up, and one of the questions we were asking for ourselves was, yoga is an $80 billion global industry. We don't have a single Indian yoga brand. Just think about it, right? We're all very proud talking about yoga, this, that, and the other, but we don't have a single Indian company that's doing anything worthwhile in yoga on a scale that the world will notice. You take an example of something like haldi doodh, turmeric milk, which is kind of like a traditional drink a lot of us have grown up having, and it just exists, but it takes a Starbucks to convert it into a $7, $8 turmeric latte brand, right? And we don't get any benefit out of that. So there is no economic value to India's cultural assets and artifacts. We have not been able to think of it in a sense that drives value, because unless we start thinking of it in economic terms, the downstream impact to all the artisans and craftspeople and others employed in the trades will not take place. And we have read enough to know that a lot of these traditional arts and crafts are slowly disappearing because there doesn't seem to be any market linkage and money flowing into those areas. And there has to be this linkage that needs to get created. You take Ayurveda, for example, right? You take, during Diwali, for example, there's a lot of chocolates that are suddenly becoming very popular, well packaged, branded, beautifully laid out stores, all of that. And against them, we've got the traditional Indian sweetmeat mithai shop, right? Why aren't we creating brands on, around Indian sweets and becoming big and massive, right? We've got a massive population, it's a great advantage. The world is looking at sustainability. A lot of our traditional practices are built around sustainability. So how do we take advantage of all of these things and grow? You take travel, for example, experiential tourism, right? The number of people that we get into India from overseas is less than what Singapore gets or New York City gets in a week during Christmas, right? A lot of it, of course, has to do with a bunch of other issues, relating to infrastructure, security, hygiene, cleanliness, all of those things. We understand that. But the point is, how does one start thinking about building successful businesses? And what we have chosen is 5 focus areas that we want to work in. Food and beverage, health, wellness and beauty, home decor and furnishings, fashion and accessories, and experiential tourism, right? So there's so much that can be offered by us. But because of the way we have structured ourselves, namely, India by tradition has been what is referred to as an open architecture. In other words, whatever we have is available for everyone else to use and modify and to commercialize and deploy. But we have never thought of using all of it for our own sake. for creating economic wealth with all these assets that we have. Even today, if you look at so many of our policies tend to be ones where we are quite happy to be a market for others to come and play in. But we have not created champions, either national champions or global champions emerging out of India, whereas other countries actively pursue that approach. If you look at India Brand Equity Forum, right, which is a government initiative, the entire policy architecture is all about how to make India attractive for overseas investors. Never is it about how do you take Indian genius and may build extremely valuable, successful commercial enterprises for around the world, and also obviously in India, right? It is that mindset shift that needs to happen. And we've seen this happen successfully in first in IT, then in technology startups. And we want to bring some of that thinking and approach. The good news is that the demographics favor all of this. There's a young population, a very different India, aspirational. I mean, last year, Google did a research, and the number one trend that Google identified that's happening in India, both rural and urban, is that people are proud to be Desi. That was the research finding from Google. And it is very interesting because if you go talk to people, you find that, yes, that we need to be able to create our own stuff, and we need to be able to build our own brands. If you look at the amount of venture capital that is now slowly increasing into what is called D2C, direct to consumer brands that are getting created, which are all Indian brands. Whether it is in tea, whether it is in yoga, whether it is in healthcare, whether it is in garment design, whether it is in health food, whatever, multiple categories. But the point is, it has just started in the last 2 or 3 years. And, people have been taking their first tentative steps. And clearly, the final objective of all of this that we intend to do at NICE is hopefully have an impact on creating a brand India. And thereafter, India's own soft power, etc., gets enhanced. Obviously, all of this is very closely correlated with India's own economic growth. It's how quickly its people become rich, all of those things. But the fact remains that this is an important area for all of us to think about, that how does one create successful enterprises around our cultural artifacts, right? So that in effect was the thinking that led to the creation. So that was the what part of this, right? And the why, I was telling you that, either we will lose all our artifacts, our traditions, our practices, the knowledge, and most importantly, tens of millions of people whose livelihoods depend on actually working in these areas, whether it is on the Kalamkari side, or whether it's Pochampalli, or whether it's Varli, or whether it's Chittara, or anything, right? All of those areas will start disappearing if they are not economically viable. I mean, there is a limit to all of these surviving just on philanthropic capital. And, beyond that, that has to have economic merit, where brands are created, businesses are created, customers are buying, and all of that. And to make all those things happen, contemporary designs, contemporary ways of doing business, whether it's merchandising, using technology, dovetailing into global supply chains, all of those things, understanding of markets, customers, blah, 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 all of that needs to be brought in. And all of those had been quite absent for the decades that we've been looking at all of these areas. So that is an important reason for us to be able to do this. With regard to the opportunity space itself, right? If you look at what we do, like everything else that India does, if you look at our commodity, if you look at our exports, not almost every single thing that we export is a commodity, right? There is no finished branded product that gets shipped out of India. And because we've never thought about how to do these things, it's all been commodity based. Now, the developed world understands brands. It takes the commodities, does the value addition, converts them into brands, and essentially captures the big chunk of the economic value that gets created. And and it always has been something that has struck us, that India, we grow tea, we grow coffee, all of that. But the tea exchanges, coffee exchanges, worldwide, global, etc., are all located outside of India, outside of the countries where they are grown, whether it's grown in Kenya or Sri Lanka or Brazil or wherever else. So, and brands are again largely owned by the West. It's unless the Tatas acquired Tetley and so on. But outside of that, these creation of these brands has not been something that has happened organically within us, because we don't think brands and building stuff like that, right? And it is true. You take garments, you take in any sector of the economy. Now look at how other countries think about it. A small country like New Zealand, it's known for its dairy products. They are thinking of exports. They are selling their brands into China. They have launched a joint venture with the Bianis Food Hall and launching their dairy products in India. But we are not thinking of creating 20 brands that will go out into even neighboring markets, right? It is essentially a mindset challenge that we need to be able to bring into the country, that yes, that we can also do and compete on the global stage. Obviously, a lot of it is a function of the environment within which we work in India, but that's, in my mind, like I said, that's the constraint-based thinking. It's not a possibility-based thinking. That is it possible for us to go out and create these brands, right? And the good news is that, yes, it is indeed possible. And people are taking the steps. People are raising money. Top-class talent is coming into the fray now. Earlier, people would kind of be hesitant to get into an entrepreneurial venture. Now, a lot of that, the cultural barriers to that are coming down. The word startup has entered the government of India's lexicon of 5 years back, which is itself a crazy achievement. So you're finding change taking place in India, as it inevitably does, in a very, very evolutionary manner. And it is, the slow incremental change is what is taking place. And if you look at intellectual property and areas like that, right? I mean, we've had situations where big global fashion brands like Dior, $6 or $7 billion French fashion powerhouse, has stolen designs from Indian designers, right? Because the Indian designers didn't even understand that there is something called intellectual property that needs to be protected, that their brands, their copyrights, their trademarks, etc., all have to be protected. They haven't understood that, right? And therefore, they don't take effort to protect any of their knowledge. Now take another example of Michael Jackson's, right? Michael Jackson had a hit song called Smooth Criminal. Now, when he in that particular song, there's a particular move made by Michael Jackson where he wears a kind of shoe that allows him to tilt at 45 degrees. That entire dance sequence and the shoe was patented, right? So the point I'm making is, you have to learn to think like that, which is the important thing, that I've got something of value. Because it is valuable, others may want to copy it. And therefore, can I protect it somehow? The Indian Copyright Act, for example, allows one to actually copyright your music and your songs, and including your dance moves. But how many of our dancers and choreographers even know that such a thing exists, right? Awareness is always the first battle that in the mind that needs to be fought. And it's very important that we start thinking about markets, we start thinking about customer segments, we start thinking about dominating and owning markets. If you look at how the playbook of the successful countries around the world, the playbook has been built on 3 pillars. They have created institutions, they have created standards, and they have understood markets. In other words, markets is a two-way thing. That is, I make my own market attractive, and therefore I leverage and make you behave as I want you to, because if you want access to my market. Second, I will use my power to pry open markets overseas so that I can go in there and sell my goods and services. Now, institutions, whether it's the United Nations, whether it is the World Bank, whether it's the WTO, you take any institution, they've all been set up by the developed countries and their arms. They have set up protocols of governance, ways of doing things, etc. And therefore, they dictate who gets in, who gets out, what is the mode of operation, what are the levers of influence, what is the technology standard for acceptance, what is the quality standard, what is the process standard. Every single thing gets defined. And the other countries which lack capacity or don't have the wherewithal to participate get left out. But they have to play the game on what is ostensibly a free and open system. China has understood this, and they have created their own playbook. So the Chinese approach has been essentially to work on creating their playbooks. And you can see that clearly, how they operate. Now, the point is, India cannot be a China. India cannot be an America. India has to be India, right? For that, we have to figure out what is our strategic imperative. How do we build upon on the assets that we have? If we want to be a country that has a certain brand value, that has got soft power with which it can claim, let's say, geopolitical leverage and other leverage, we need to be able to think on these terms, right? You create companies that are successful, that have brands that go out and create value. You have policy that supports it, that enables our companies to succeed. And there are, so many other things that get rolled out along with this. And clearly, when you look at, let's say the country with the greatest soft power, clearly America, right? I mean, with its education, it attracts so many people there, the research, the university system, blue jeans, rock and roll music, you name it, right? I mean, the influence is just phenomenal. And all the brands that one can think of will be largely American brands. In the area of fashion, you've got Italian, you've got French. In areas of cuisine, again, you've got Italian and French. You have the Japanese brands coming on the automobile sector, now again in whiskey and so on. And what is fascinating is we have so much available in India, but we don't think in those terms. And I'll give you a very interesting example. Some years back, yeah, just please bear with me. My laptop was getting into battery saver mode. Some years ago, I was in Scotland and I went on a Scotch whiskey trail. Walking around there, you look at the history of the Scotch whiskey in Scotland, right? And whiskey comes from Old Gaelic, meaning water of life, which I think a lot of us would perhaps attest to. But the Scotch whiskey business was essentially an illicit business, was run as a cottage industry in the backyards of most of the Scottish homes. They had struggled with getting legal approval and so on. And they would continue making whiskey in stills in homes. That is how it all began. And then the British took a liking to Scotch whiskey. They conquered the world. And then Scotch whiskey, therefore, became the favored drink of countries around the world, wherever the British went. Okay, that's long and short of all of it. And of course, for great marketing, the chemistry behind it is quite basic. There's no high touch. There's a lot of art and there's a lot of fantastic marketing that gets packaged around Scotch whiskey. Now you take our local drinks, okay, whether it's a Mahua, for example, right, or a Feni. The funny thing is we have classified them as local brews. Feni is a local brew with a GI, a geographical indicator tag, because of which Feni cannot be sold outside Goa. Just imagine how ludicrous that is. Feni is not available outside Goa. Why? Because it's got a local country brew tag. Now, if Feni got the same attention by way of capital, by way of modern processes, chemical processes, marketing, packaging, bottling, etc., there is no reason why a Feni could not have become like a tequila, which is again a local drink, that came out of Mexico, but the Americans jumped in and transformed it. Or you take vodka, which is a local drink that came out of Russia, right? Or sake. So there are multiple examples. The good news is that young, or let's say, I wouldn't say young, I would say a new breed of entrepreneurs has emerged who are also thinking on these lines and are going out and trying to build businesses and transforming the nature of what traditionally our heritage drinks. So there, for example, I don't know if you have heard of a guy by the name of Desmond Nazareth. He's part of the NICE network. Amazing guy. IIT Madras, went to went for his master's to the US, software, blah blah, all that. Then he came to Bombay, wanted to buy tequila and couldn't find tequila in Bombay. Then he said, why the hell isn't tequila available in India? So he started doing research. And today he's got a company called Desmond G. You can look it up, Desmond and JI, where he makes, Mahua drinks, right? He has worked with the governments, state governments, to ensure that the law is appropriately modified because of various colonial era laws that we have continued to carry. It's absolutely impossible today for anyone, to make something in the alcohol and beverage area. So, he's worked very assiduously to make that happen. And like him, there are a bunch of others. So this is all entrepreneurial energy. This is what I said, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. What needs to be done? Let's make it happen, right? It is that can do, will do, should do mindset of the entrepreneur that makes things happen, right? And that is the energy that we want to be able to deploy and harness and nurture and create cultural entrepreneurs who will go out and build successful brands that are built around the Indian cultural artifacts, whether it's, like I said, in food, beverage, travel. You take travel, right? I mean, there's enormous scope. I think nobody disagrees on that. But who's doing what about it, right? To be able to offer fantastic services, experiences to people. Slowly you're seeing change happen. Who's driving the change? It's entrepreneurs, right? Every single area that you can think of is open for business if entrepreneurs jump into it. Our job at NICE is to essentially create that enabling environment where they can go out and make things happen. You would take healthcare, right? Health and wellness and beauty and all of that is a big business. Shanaz Hussain was the first person back almost 40 years back or 50 years back who said, I am actually in the business of bottling 5,000 years of heritage for the world. When she came out with her herbal treatments, right? Whatever she had learned and picked up from Lucknow and she learned Ayurvedic treatments from Iran, where she was posted where she was along with her husband. So there are lots of such cases. You take Indian cuisine, unbelievable variety, right? Now, if you look at, we all will sit down and watch a MasterChef program, but how come there is no MasterChef equivalent in India by Indians for the rest of the world, right? So there's enough literature to show and research to show that what needs to be done and how to make it happen. If you read about Thailand, how Thailand has actively promoted a government-backed policy for making Thai cuisine available around the world. There's actually a program that is run by the government in partnership with entrepreneurs, food entrepreneurs, to propagate Thai cuisine and Thai culture and Thai ingredients, and therefore tourism into Thailand, using their cuisine as the vehicle, right? So it's amazing, and therefore it's possible. And the question is, our job is to ignite that idea of possibilities in a million entrepreneurs who can go out and create stuff. And our job is to create the enabling policy, or at least help drive policy change, do the advocacy, establish the partnerships, provide mentorship, and enable investors and donors and corporations and others to come in and be part of this. Amazon today has a program called Amazon Karigar. Amazon Karigar today has got a few million Karigars who are on the Amazon platform. Why did it have to be Amazon to come and do that? Why don't we think like that? Right? So these are some of the thoughts I thought I would leave behind with you about that. We need to start thinking in an entrepreneurial way and ask why not, right? And not be happy with status quo. Challenge the system, make things happen. You know, because something has happened for 50 years doesn't mean that is the right way or that's the only way to keep doing things. Change has to be embraced. The time has come. We've got fabulous advantages of demography, of talent, of assets that we own. We just have to learn to start leveraging them. So I'll just pause here. And any questions, assuming you guys are still awake. And
Thank you, Sanjay, for that very, very thought-provoking talk. In fact, I mean, many of the things that you said resonate very well with me. In fact, some of the things gave me goosebumps thinking how things are slowly catching up. When we used to travel in the UK and US, you'll find there'll be some wall, and around that, with nothing around it, they'll have built one whole story around it, put
Yep.
one souvenir shop in front of it,
Yes.
and made it one tourism spot where thousands of people are visiting.
Yes.
Whereas in India, you have so many beautiful places with nothing there. Nobody's like given looking there also because nobody
Yes.
developed it. So you wonder about this, you know.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
glad you guys are doing something about that. You know.
I mean, you know, if you look at architecture, right? You know, it is by law. I mean, in Paris and London and a lot of European capitals, every building will have the name of the architect. Okay, and in some corner of that building, you know, there will be an engraving or a plaque or something. So the city records maintain all of these things. Ask ourselves, right? In our cities, do we care? So if we got ugly monstrosities emerging, nobody cares. Who's the architect? That's not even it doesn't even enter our consciousness to ask that question, right? So the point is that in every single field, every single domain that you can think of, you will find that there is so much that can be done, right? The bad news is that it has not happened. The good news is that, you know, there's huge momentum and tailwinds today to make it happen.
Yeah, Sanjay, you echo a lot of what I've been going through, and Ravindran here and I are both part of a course at IIM Ahmedabad, which I've been teaching for the last 6 years. It's called Creative in Cultural Business Program.
Oh, Anchal is part of NICE.
Oh, it's part of NICE. Okay.
Yeah. So Anchal Jain.
Anchal, in fact, was my neighbor for 15 years in Gurgaon, and he's
Okay.
10 years my junior at IIM Ahmedabad.
Small world.
So we co-created this course in many ways, and I've been teaching there.
Wonderful.
And pretty much a lot of the things that you're saying, in fact, I really, nowadays in the last couple of years, we have started getting some angel investors to sit in on the final day presentation so that we can get some of them funding, and there could be many. And if Anchal is already part of NICE, then I'm sure.
In fact, Anchal and I, we were talking about creating a program in a joint effort where all your cohorts that emerge out of the CCPP program at IIM Ahmedabad can be dovetailed into our program where we have mentors and investors. So maybe we can create a joint program that flows smoothly from IIM Ahmedabad to NICE, and then, you know, create a virtuous cycle.
So I just want two observations in the course of these last 6 years, which I want to see whether you are seeing that among some of your NICE clients or startups. One, I find that there is a lot of passion and commitment to product development. Most of these entrepreneurs, and I've seen a variety of businesses from clutch bags to experiential tourism to you name it. I mean, much of all that you said across all those domains, I have seen some who continue to be committed. I mean, they were my mentees, but 3 years down the road, some of them had put me on their board, and he's launched a very successful brand of nose pins. So some very interesting success stories, and some which have sort of not managed to go forward. But one of the things I was discussing with Anchal is that I find that there is great commitment, interest, passion in the product development area. All of them seem to start with this great product or service idea, and then they are willing to spend hours chiseling that and getting that right. but extremely poor in commercialization. So
Yes.
areas of commerce, areas of translating that into a
Yes.
meaningful business, revenue
Yes.
streams, revenue models. So invariably at a presentation, when you finally ask the question, they will sheepishly confess that I
Yes.
got this Excel sheet and business plan, I got somebody else to do. They just seem
Yeah.
to think that is divorced from this. So it goes back to becoming, quote unquote, what I call a passionate hobby. Because unless they
Yes,
see
yes,
this and
yes.
there is a deep desire for them to want to
Yes.
build a brand, not
Yeah.
just here, but as you said,
Yeah.
globally. And there are some
Yes.
entrepreneurs who have been there with us who have clearly seen that I'm not even looking in India. I want to sell in the UK in the best stores. But those are far in and few between.
But you're absolutely right, Prasad. In fact, our objective is to bring that kind of thinking into the entrepreneurs. And that is not, and I must also confess that it's not just unique to entrepreneurs in the space of cultural and creative economy. It's an Indian problem. Okay. Because I remember 25 years back, the first wave of entrepreneurs who came for IT and technology were exactly like that. I've got this product, I've got this crazy code I've written, and that is it. The rest of it didn't seem to matter, right?
Correct.
And even today, as a country, as a people, sales and marketing is not something that is in our mind, right? We are still in a production, economy mindset.
Right.
We are not in a market economy mindset, right? And you can put a 10, 12-year-old kid from the US on a stage, they will sell you anything. You can't do that here. But what's happening is, the good thing is increasingly more and more kids, more and more people from different segments of the economy are getting exposed to a structured way of thinking about entrepreneurship. For example, school curriculums are slowly beginning to introduce the idea of entrepreneurship, right? Which is quite amazing. Then there are street vendors and others who are being trained by multiple NGOs now on how to think about entrepreneurship. How do you think of scale? What's the difference between a vada pav guy and McDonald's? Right? So, it is that. You're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. The ability to think markets and customers and work backwards from there, as opposed to working forwards from saying, I've built this something.
Fabulous product, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely correct. Would love to work with you and connect up.
As you started speaking, I didn't know of your Archangel connection. I was going to call Archangel and say, we've got somebody we must speak to before the next course begins.
Small world.
Small world.
Yeah.
And there is this one mentee who's built a very successful no-spin business. They're a family of traditional jewelers.
Right.
But father used to sell diamonds from Karaikudi in a typical South Indian jeweler mode. He doesn't even have a store. You sit across the table and buy.
Right.
Very traditional. Selvanathan. This kid who did this course with me, he's a tech guy. He did a tech job, then worked with IIM Bangalore in some program, and then joined our program. And he was my mentee. And he was really very keen to do something on his own of scale, linked to the business that the family was in, but completely different. So he said, I'm going to build a no-spin brand, because he said today's emerging young women, other than classic South Indian, I have to discover this category. And so he decided to build a brand called Mookuti, which he's built very successfully now, 2 years down the road.
Very nice.
And he sort of every month has to have a 1-hour meeting with me on the phone, or when he comes to Bangalore.
Wonderful.
So he's, one of those few students who has taken all the right steps and has seen this opportunity of being a brand. So he's creating a brand category, so there have been a few others, but I would say I'm disappointed that the numbers are not large enough.
It will happen.
People wanting to sort of really chase and do this. Some very good ideas, but
the way we are thinking about this, Prasad, is that at multiple levels. So you can build a successful business, and we have defined successful business as one that's profitable and self-sustaining.
Yeah.
At a city level, at a state level, at a regional level, at a country level, and obviously international, right? So that's the pyramid. Now, the basic funda is, unless you have thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs at the bottom, you're not going to be able to get the guys at the top, right? And therefore, like Vinod Khosla used to say back in the day that, unless you take 1,000 shots at goal, one is not going to go in, right? So you got to keep that. So that we need multiple people attempting this, but it's all got to be done with the idea of creating a successful branded business. That is the objective. It can't be, like you very rightly pointed out, a small time passionate hobby. That's not a business, right? That's a hobby.
And maybe at the education level too, like I keep telling Anshul, what we're doing with 30 entrepreneurs twice a year, which means 60 is our intake, is just not good enough. You must have much larger numbers being sort of addressed like this all over the country.
And now, thanks to Zoom and other things, it's possible to have some kind of a hybrid model to do this. A friend of mine, ex-Flipkart guy, he runs a program called Udyam, which is taking entrepreneurship education into schools across the country. There's also a program where, all the nano entrepreneurs, guys on the street who are doing istri work and vegetable vending and stuff like that, getting them organized and getting them to think in an entrepreneurial manner, because one can be an entrepreneur out of necessity, because I've got nothing else to do and this is the easiest thing for me to do, right? The other is entrepreneurship of choice. The other is I can be an income substitute entrepreneur, or I can be a wealth creator entrepreneur, right? So it all depends on what the person wants to do. And, so getting people to start thinking along those lines is very critical. And I think, at the end of the day, it's all about a certain critical mass being achieved. And, the tipping point will happen. Exactly like it happened in, I can tell you clearly from experience in IT and tech startups. If you see today what the tech startup businesses with literally billions and billions of dollars flowing in each year was not the case 10 years back, was not the case 20 years ago, right? You would be hard pressed to find entrepreneurs, right? And, it's a process, and I think the good news is that the process is getting accelerated thanks to technology, demographics, the world aspirations and things like that.
Sanjay, just a comment. Mysore as well as Bangalore are such tourist hubs, and I keep traveling to Mysore quite often because of my learning center, our learning center being there. And whenever I cross Ramnagar, I wonder why Sholay, a movie which is talked of and publicized, and people have so many messages coming almost every other month, and the entire film was shot there. There's nothing about Sholay there. It is just lying there, barren as it was with all those rocky mountains. If it were in the US, where such a successful and legendary movie was shot, it would have already turned over that money multiple times.
Yes.
In that location.
Yeah.
So it's a mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, I don't even know of any tourist van or bus which goes from Bangalore to Mysore, which says that this is where Sholay was shot and it was. No, we talk when we go by that road. Hey, this is Ramnagar. And if there's a newcomer who's from outside the state, we educate him that this is where Sholay was shot.
The other thing, Billy, is that, of course, Sholay was a movie from the 70s. Today's kids have no clue about what it is 50 years back.
So if it were developed as a site,
exactly, we have not built the narrative.
Many people would know about Sholay.
Yeah, we have not built that narrative at all.
Vinny, forget Sholay. I think a couple of kilometers down the road is Channapatna. And we have successfully destroyed the toy industry there.
Yeah.
I mean, even 10 years ago, you used to find people stopping there to buy toys, and now you find nothing. And of course, it takes our prime minister to say, let us revive the toy industry when the whole thing has gone to China. So it's
now it is made in China, Channapatna toys.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think, it's interesting, Sanjay, what you've talked about entrepreneurship. And I know, I work in a large company. So therefore, to that extent, my exposure to entrepreneurs is more limited. But one of the things that I find certainly in the food space, some youngsters who come and take my free advice, by and large, I find some of them are more interested in the valuations that they do and in terms of the fundings that they're going to get rather
Yeah.
than a sustainable focus on quality.
Yeah.
And in
Very
the food
true.
industry, I can tell you that you cannot survive for 5 years if you don't have quality. And quality seems to be kind of somewhere down in that value chain.
Yeah.
The more important question is, glitzy brand, great advertising, getting the funding done. I've got this guy, I got that guy to fund.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid certainly in the food and beverage space, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, no
to
doubt.
get our quality right.
No doubt. In fact, I think it's like this, right? I mean, a lot of people jump in because of the glamour value and sex appeal of the startup, and I think I'll go and take on the big boys and create this fantastic brand or whatever else it is. Only when you get in, you start realizing what the standards are and what's required to win, and then you will find a lot of dead bodies and corpses. Right? Yeah. But what happens through that process is that a lot of institutional knowledge gets created about what it takes to actually build. Because if you take any of the Levers or Nestle's of the world, etc., these are all 100-year-old plus companies, right? So you can't recreate that institutional knowledge in like 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it takes enormous let's say capability, competence, experience, expertise to make all of these things work. So therefore, the good news is, because there is capital that is coming from overseas, quote unquote, risk capital. Okay, because we are a capital-starved country, we can't afford all these kinds of experimentation. We have outsourced the experimentation capital to the venture capitalists who bring in money from outside. It is our entrepreneurs, therefore, who are trying the shot at success. So the money that gets burnt, if I can use that word, fortunately is not Indian money. So we are learning on somebody else's dime, right?
Yeah.
And that is exactly how a lot of these successful businesses have been built. So you learn, one guy will make a small success, his company will be bought for 50 crores. Then, he'll get some more confidence, he'll learn a bit. After 3 years, he'll build 100 crores. That is how the whole process starts. And it is a fascinating journey to observe. And I've been lucky enough to be at the ringside of many successful companies. And you start seeing how these things evolve from literally nothing. It's just the sheer entrepreneurial energy that starts getting, the commercial viability to start happening. So it's
but one of the things I've noticed, Sanjay, is the couple of youngsters that I've interacted with, of course, you have vastly more experience. I think they've got all the hardware there. I mean, they're very clever. They're very good they're very committed to the idea. They know exactly what they want. But one of the things that you talked about companies like Levers and Nestle and all that. I think one of the things that has made these companies last long, I include the Tatas there also in that same category, is culture in their DNA. I think one of the things which has made these companies successful is an abiding belief in ethics, abiding belief in respect, abiding belief in quality, in safety, and in not cutting corners and thinking long.
Yeah, no question.
10 years, 20-year kind of horizons. And I'm not saying, as a young entrepreneur, you can't be. I'm sure Henri Nestle and William Lever did not, live to be billionaires. They far from the truth. I know a little bit about Nestle. I think he was a man who went away quite modestly. But I think, this, if it is part of our entrepreneurial training,
yeah,
that all of you are providing, like you and Prasad and others, more often than not, the trip up is on running the organization rather than the strength of their ideas.
No, very, very true, Suresh. In fact, I tell a lot of the entrepreneurs, a feature is not a product is not a business is not a company, and a company is not an organization. So there's a log scale shift on each of these steps, right? As you become an organization, which is like kind of what I imagine to be the ultimate, You know, it's essentially all the culture, the ethics, the governance, the processes, every single, let's say, what you can broadly classify as qualitative aspects is what takes enormous dominance, as opposed to just, you know, your EPS and things like that, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes an organization. It transcends the person, it transcends the location, it transcends time. And, you know, so when you say this guy is a Lever's guy, or this guy is a Tata's guy, I need not have worked in those companies, but moment you use that phrase, in my mind, a image has already been formed, right? Which is essentially social memory that gets perpetuated through multiple interactions that occur across time, right? And it's all a function of exactly the points you made. It's the culture, it's the way you behave, it's your ethics, you know, et cetera, right? So those are absolutely very valid point. Do you work for Nestle, by the way?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. There's a friend of mine there who's in the, I think, marketing innovations or something, a chap called Vivek Dogra. I don't know if you know him. He works at Veve.
He works in Veve. Yeah. I've heard of him. I don't know him, but yeah, there's a guy, Vivek Dogra, is there in Switzerland. Yes.
Yes.
So Muthuraman, any
Sanjay,
comments?
the tech entrepreneurs that you mentioned,
Yeah.
the young tech product entrepreneurs, they are not, I mean, 90% of them are not into organization building.
No, they're not.
For them, it's build a product,
See,
get
I'll
a
tell you why.
valuation, get some
I'll tell you-
funding, get a valuation, sell it
I'll
off.
tell you why, Binny, because it is you have to understand the cycle of entrepreneurship as it relates to venture capital. Okay. If you take let's take a company, let's say like Infosys or Wipro or whatever, which is on the IT services side, right? They never raised any outside money. There was no pressure to grow at crazy paces. There was no pressure on valuations. For these guys, which is they're building tech products or offering solutions based on technology, the pressure on growth is phenomenal, because that is how the venture capitalist drives value. Valuation occurs because of crazy growth of customer acquisitions and, you know, stuff of that kind. And that is what drives the entire business. No, but they don't have the luxury of 20 years. I mean, you take Flipkart, right? Flipkart founded in 2007, right? It was acquired in 2018 by Walmart.
Correct.
So in that 11-year period, it had raised over $11 billion. Okay, in a combination of equity and debt, and was acquired for about enterprise value of 21 billion.
They made
Right?
this money.
So people made out like bandits.
Yeah.
Now the question is, you know, is that the right model? Well, it is the right model for that kind of a business. It's not the right model for something else. Right. And that is how, if you look at America, you know, wealth gets created that way. So now all the Flipkart guys, I mean, at least I know personally about 25, 30 of them, who are all now doing their second or third companies. All of them are investing and supporting other entrepreneurs. They are now donating to social causes, right? So all of that is happening. So it's a very fascinating thing to observe, to see what happens. Right, which was, you know, and therefore, again, I'm saying the good news is that all the money that might get burnt is coming from overseas. So as a poor country, we can't afford to burn money, right? But it's somebody else's dollar, and they're keen because there's opportunity. They're, you know, making money here, which is fine. No problem with that, because that else we would not be able to build infrastructure. I mean, you know, if you think of, you know, so why did Flipkart raise so much money? Because you have to build infrastructure in India and it doesn't exist. I have to build an entire logistics service. Correct. And that itself costs billions of dollars. I have to build this crazy payment mechanisms because, you know, in India, not everybody doesn't have a credit card. So how do I take cash on delivery? So I have to create a system that enables cash on delivery. So cash collection is a big business. And accounting for it, ensuring there's no leakage, you know, blah, blah, blah. So stuff that banks have been doing, cash collection is what banks do. So the entire backend has to get created. Logistics network, which courier companies do, I have to now create, right? So like that, you have to create multiple businesses within the parent of Flipkart, right? That is the challenge. And hence you need huge amounts of money. Now, the good news is all of this will get built thanks to capital that comes from outside. You take Reliance Jio, right? They've got a telecom network now. Now they've raised $20 billion, largely money coming in from private equity investors from overseas, right? Now they're going to build infrastructure. Now, who's going to benefit from that infrastructure? We all will. The government does not have that kind of cash. It's not their job to do this, right? So you take risk capital from those who participate in the business of risk. And all of that is there outside of India. So, invite those guys in and create infrastructure in India. That's the right thing to do. Otherwise, you'll never have it.
Muthu sir, you wanted to say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead. And
Sanjay, you're doing a fantastic work in an
Thank you,
area.
sir.
In an area which is required in India, because the amount of wealth that India can create for itself by creating value from its culture and history is really enormous, and nobody has attempted it.
Yes, thank you.
And the point that I want to make is don't get impatient. The reason I'm saying don't get impatient is because India is really, the commercial India is only 30 years old.
Yes.
Prior to 1991, we didn't have products. Forget about anything commercial. We didn't even know how to think commercially before 1991.
Correct.
So first the products had to come. That took, I think, 10, 15 years. And now the commercial thinking has started in India in the last 5, 6 years.
Yes.
Because I am beginning to see, if you see Titan, not too far away from where we live, in the last 10 years, they have created more than 2,500 karigars for their jewelry industry.
Fantastic.
And it's now a world example. It's quoted in the Harvard Business Review and places like that.
Right.
And things are beginning to happen. And I can see what for example, Tata Steel, what it does in Orissa in terms of how to get the village craftsmen into the global arena of markets. It's beginning to happen. So I can see in the last 5, 6 years, some major movement taking place, and people like you are sort of flaming it and flowering it very well. And
Thank you so much.
Very important.
No, thank you so much. I think our goal, like I said, we are a Section 8 company. Our goal is to work in partnership to collaborate with anybody and everybody who resonates with this idea. And, so bring top-class people in, participate, including volunteers, everybody, whoever wishes to be part of it.
Yeah, one of the important things, what happens is often these things get imbibed in human beings at the time of education, schools and colleges and so on. For example, till 5 years ago, the business management schools of India didn't have a program on entrepreneurship. And even today, 90% of the business schools think that marketing is something which was, giving a product from person A to person B or entity A to entity B at the end of it. So that thinking about entrepreneurship as to how to think about the subject is actually has to be inculcated in business schools in a very strong way.
Right.
When that happens in a few years' time to come, what you are imagining and what you are dreaming about will happen faster.
Thank you, sir.
Hema, you had a question?
Yeah,
Hema?
as usual, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a lowly doctor here, and I'm trying to bring this discussion back onto the track, which is cultural entrepreneurship. And all my respected friends, my dear friends, have again hijacked it back to entrepreneurship, leaving the cultural out. Now, Mr. Suresh will have a problem with me later, but what I wanted to ask you particularly is that I'm a big customer for Fab India. So that is also a place where they have been marketing and culture, particularly, successfully.
Yes.
Ikat, weaving, motifs, block printing, all of that. And I became a customer, and part of it was that I'm encouraging artisans. It was a big draw for me, and they became very successful. Now I have a niggling doubt, and that's what I wanted to ask you. You may be aware. Is it gone the other way? We were talking about where we are not marketing culture effectively when we had it, and it is all going to waste. We are not making money out of it. We are not making a success out of it. But is it also possible that maybe they are doing it a little bit too commercially? Because each and in a lot of this stuff that you get from there are hugely expensive, very highly priced. Are the artisans actually getting it? Do they need to be so highly priced? And does it need to be sort of like a high class thing as Fab India has become? Would you
Yeah,
happen to know
sure.
what is happening there?
Well, I don't know the details, but certainly, I do know that Fab India has, because if you look at their entire approach, right, they've decided to cater to the affluent class because they are the ones who can actually buy. And
That's because now it has become like that. That's what my point is.
Yeah, because you see,
They have
Fab India has
taken
been
it
around
to-
for 50 years, right? I mean, William Bisel's dad started the company. So it's been around for 50 odd years. And the question is that who is the customer for a Fab India, right? Is the customer someone like you and I, or is the actual customer the artisan and the weaver? Right? What that means is customer as in the benefits of Fab India, whatever profits they make, dividends they wish to distribute, etc., go back to what they've created cooperatives and producer groups in which
No,
all
they have.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is that they have, artisans do benefit. I'm sure they do. But I feel that the margin is too much, as in the artisans benefit a little, but the fat people are getting even richer. And in the bargain, you could have actually encouraged, a lot of artisans and also gotten a whole customer base from the middle class. They have chosen to go into the upper middle class or the rich people who are the only ones.
So there's an opportunity for in India, as the country itself evolves and grows, there's an opportunity for 50 Fab Indias across the entire pricing spectrum, right? Everybody need not be buying a Mercedes.
Yes,
there's a market for
and that is where the quality thing comes in.
So I'm saying, so there's opportunity for other entrepreneurs who see a space. Somebody can be at the lower end, somebody can be in the middle, and somebody can be at the top, right? Everybody need not be the same. The market is big enough. So hence
there should be some sort of maybe a regulatory body which
once you have a regulatory body, that's the fastest way to kill the business, particularly in our country. What typically happens is that you got regulatory bodies for specific, let's say, design clusters and art clusters or craft clusters, right? You got Craft Council of India, for example, that brings together all these people, and a lot of this is very local. So the crafts group in Karnataka will be different from that in Andhra or Tamil Nadu or Kerala or wherever else. Right? So you can't have national scale things, particularly in areas like this, which are highly local. For example,
those are there. Those are the Khadi Udyogs are there. The handloom outfits are there. They're all there.
No, I'm talking of the crafts people who are doing particular designs. So if I'm doing Bidri based design, Bidri is available only in particular place. If I'm doing Moradabad brassware, it's there only there.
Yeah.
Right. So those are highly local.
They are staying true to form, I feel. I think they are staying true to form, like what I would have envisioned even for fabrics. Yeah. But some of these brand names, I think they're taking it too far, taking it out of the reach.
That may be a commercial decision. People. I don't know enough to comment on it. And frankly, my view is, look, that's a commercial decision of a company. It's like saying, why does Oberoi charge so much for a hotel, right? It's their choice. And the question is, what are the others doing about it?
Yeah, but
why 150 others?
Because they are entertainment. I mean, they're not actually selling culture in that sense. So this is
Fab India is also selling. Fab India is selling products based on culture. Those who are right. The question is, my view would be, rather than worry about what Fab India does, why not have 50 other Fab Indias across the pricing range? Right. That is where you have to encourage entrepreneurs. See, you are a vast country, right? Fab India's revenues are, I think, about 1,000 crores at best. It's not even that. It's a very small company. Okay, so the question is that, if you want to build scale, you need lots of them. I mean, today you take after 70 years. Okay, Amul is a $4-5 billion company, right? And it's absolutely phenomenal. And, Dr. Kurian did an amazing job and various other things. Now, the question one should ask is, in all of India, is there room for just one Amul? Right? That is what I mean by, we should challenge ourselves to think like that. I mean, because we're such a vast country and our economy is almost $3 trillion. We'll grow. We need a lot more entrepreneurs.
Okay, one last question, I think. Then we'll close. We are already past our time, but it's so
Thank you. Thank you.
so
Thank
interesting.
you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any last question?
I have a request. Is it
before we-
possible? Yeah.
Okay.
If it's possible
tell me.
I leave behind my mail ID. You already have
Okay.
it. I don't know. So I would love to be in touch with those of you who are keen on this area. And I would love to reach out to you and seek your guidance and participation in NICE as we make progress.
Okay. Please WhatsApp your email ID to me. I'll share it with our
Wonderful.
all our
My pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, great. Any last comment? Then we'll close.
For a
Okay.
non-entrepreneur like
Murali,
Hema said, for a non-entrepreneur like Hema said, I found it fascinating. So thanks, Sanjay. That was
Thank
really
you,
very,
Murali.
very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
you.
Thank
Good
you
night.
very much
Thanks a
for a
lot.
very interesting evening.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir. Bye.